Hello and welcome to another video where today we're going to be looking at something that happens quite a lot, something I've been guilty of a lot of times, and even still fall in the trap of blaming a single muscle for something that you see in a movement. So I'm going to explain why it's something that we need to get our head around and change our way of thinking. But we hear it all the time. Your hip problem because you've got weak glutes, or a knee problem. Can't touch your toes because your hamstrings are too tight. Your knee sore because you've got a weak VMO. Got a sore back because you've got a weak core. We've heard them all right? So, and they may actually be a contributing factor, but to say it's the only thing is really ignorant to how it interacts with other things. So, because muscles perform multiple roles within a split second when we move. It's not just one thing. You might see a weakness in that one thing, but it might be a reaction to multiple things that are happening at the same time. So, so just even the simple fact of walking, there's so many things that are decelerating and accelerating. They're getting up out of a chair. Some are in contraction, so quads and hamstrings are in contraction at the same time, which sort of goes against the logic of what most people think. So some muscles are concerned with slowing you down, while some are more focused on moving you forward. So all of this happens within the blink of an eye. So while it might appear for a muscle to be weak or even tight for that matter, assessing it individually ignores how it's really used and how it interacts with the other partners in crime. So we might see problems here, but we should be asking why is the muscle weak, or why is the muscle tight? If we've sort of answered that question, then we really solve the puzzle, and it might be multiple things. It may even be nothing to do with the muscle, but how it's coordinated from the brain and the nervous system, as in the case of this sort of thing. This is very much a coordination thing that's then led to stiffness and poor stabilising strategies through movement. Great quote from Gray Cook, this one: stop thinking about things from a kinesiological standpoint. Movements are simply movements, so they aren't specific to one muscle. You need to move better if you want to improve your function. So you've got to improve by just trying to improve movement and not and disregarding muscle. You start to improve that muscle that you were targeting, but in line with everything else. All right, so this is a great quote to sort of keep in mind. So why do we blame one muscle? Well, it sort of comes back to how we react to things, really. It's a cause and effect sort of thing, but unfortunately that works good for things like a broken down car or something in your house. It makes sense to treat things like that way. So so if you have a broken wheel, you just replace the wheel. And it's right, but instead of but with the human body, it's a lot more complicated than that, and there's a lot of systems that can really create the trouble in the musculoskeletal system. So, example, thinking, being stressed out can give you sore shoulders. It has nothing to do with the muscles and what type of training you're going to do. It's the fact that you're stressed out and your thoughts are running through the nerves that are highly concentrated up around the head and the neck, and that's going to make those sore shoulders. And anyone who's been stressed out will know that. So that's another example would be like sore back from gut problems. So if you've eaten some poor food, you have sore abs, but it's not your abdominal muscles that are the problem, it's your digestive system, and they're just shutting down the muscles. So that's one reason we sort of react to things, and we tend to just treat the area in pain no different to what we do for a car. The experts, even like myself, are when we first to begin our career in this industry, we're taught the human anatomy model based on the muscle's origin and insertion. So, and it's good to know this, but unfortunately we don't move like this, because if we did, we would be a robot. So it's good to understand the basic function of, this muscle pulls this bone to this, from this origin to this insertion, but it doesn't explain how those muscles interact when the multiple joints are moving, and it doesn't explain. And this is not taught very much, and this is why a lot of people are being treated for just the muscle, but not really looking at the muscles that were meant to slow it down, that were further away from the moving limb. This is where a lot of trainers just really don't understand how other muscles nowhere near the moving limb are heavily involved to what's going to happen to that muscle, and the contractions that are opposing the moving thing. Also understanding the slings and how they combine to create motion and stiffness. All of these, how they interact with each other, is very, very important. A great book to read on this, Anatomy Trains by Thomas Myers. You can get a lot of great information on how that sort of systems work together really well. So an example would be like during gait walking. Every muscle from the trunk down has one function the minute your foot hits the ground. All these muscles are trying to act together to stop the ankle, knee and hip from bending, to prevent you from falling to the ground. So that all these muscles have the same function, which is to apply the brakes and slow down. So it pretty much goes against the concept of the origin and insertion model, where they're saying, where in that model they're saying some muscles are contracting to extend and some are trying to contract to flex, and some are lengthening, when really they're actually all doing the same job at the same time, because if they don't, you fall. So, and in running it's even more so. So during the landing phase, the quads are contracting eccentrically, prevent the knee from flexing, and the hamstrings are contracting to prevent both the knee and the hip from flexing. So they're both trying to prevent flexion in the landing phase. So I've not even spoken about the propulsion stage and even the muscles around the foot and the ankle, because they're also doing something very similar. So they're having multiple roles to lock and unlock the joints of the foot. So if one of them doesn't do their job well, then they all don't do their job well. Someone has to compensate to make up for what's not working. So to blame one muscle in just an action of walking, can you see how that's so difficult to say you just need to strengthen your VMO or your glutes are weak? They may appear weak, but they may be weak because of something else that's not working right. Another reason we try to isolate is we try to make sense of all these things, because it seems so complicated. Everything I've just quickly explained is really complex. So to make it simple, we put it into small pieces, and then it's easy to sort of say, okay, well, this is the problem, and you know, and then we can basically try to trace back the cause and effect, you know, and try to turn things into black and white answers when really they're not. They're always grey in exercise. If there's one thing I've learned, there's never an absolute way. There's a lot of things that I say on these videos, you know, they're true most of the times, but sometimes I break all the rules because it doesn't make sense. The person's just different. Science and research, you know, a lot of people base a lot of things on this, but science and research is never absolute. It's never 100% of the time it's true. And they're trying to look for things, you know, and a lot of this stuff is good, but there's a lot of stuff that really confuses people, and they take a little bit of information and apply it, and it doesn't work, and they just continue to apply it because, you know, so our trying to isolate things, and this is where in nutrition is an example where, you know, they're trying to sort of say if you eat a strawberry that does this to you, well, it might for some people, it might for others, it may not do the exact opposite. There's no one way. All right, so Gray Cook, another good quote that he has, he calls this reductionism, and he makes a great observation here. Breaking down movement to isolated segments has not reduced our musculoskeletal injuries or made us fitter or leaner. So it's interesting when you look at it like that. So if all that stuff was working, we would be getting better, but really we're actually getting worse. And that was one reason why I changed my style of training, because I was doing exactly that, and I was probably making more people worse than helping people, and it was frustrating me immensely, because I was really wanting to help people. Felt like I was doing the opposite, so I had to go away and learn stuff. And this is where, you know, come across things like this, and it made a huge difference. So we must move beyond thinking in isolation, look at the body as a whole. It's only through looking at the body as a system, as systems, can we improve everything as the way it's designed. Mistake here, but whenever we perform an isolated, we're employing a muscle action that's against the function of the nervous system, and it's something that we would never use. So it does not necessarily mean it's bad, it just means there may be a purpose for using it, but it's against how our brain coordinates the movement. So it's unlikely to change the movement, causing pain if the fault within the movement is not addressed. So a clamp for the glutes, for example, if the glute function is not integrated into a movement of a squat, then it's completely useless. A bit like here as bicep curl, it's like only one cog in many cogs. So if it's moving at a different speed to the others, it doesn't change anything. If anything, it probably makes it worse. All right, so in this case, is this an example of weak glutes? A lot of people would say it is, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. So things that we would want to be looking for, because it could be a lot of other things. It could be the result of muscle inhibition. So if during an isolated strength test, for example, say for the glutes, like the clam we saw a second ago, or in this case the bridge or hip extension, let's say the person passes both of those and they showed good strength, can you still conclude it's a lack of glute strength? So, because how can they have strength here but not on the next one? Because how can the muscle just lose it, have it and then lose it? It can't lose it. It just doesn't know how to use it well when it's working with something else. And one reason for that is there might be an inhibition. So this is where you need to understand tonic and phasic muscles. You can read the book by Vladimir Yanda. There's a lot of great stuff on that. The tonic muscles, basically, there's two sides of muscles. So the tonic ones are all these ones here, the phasic ones are these ones here. Some of them share things, so the hamstrings can sort of be on both sides. But basically the tonic ones are very much prone to overworking and dominating, and they in essence shut down and steal the workload of the phasic ones. An example would be, say, the quads on this side of stealing the work from the VMO, the weaker one, because it's more of a phasic in nature. Another one, upper traps. So upper traps stealing the work both from serratus anterior and lower trapezius, creating all types of neck and shoulder problems. And they just continue to overwork on this side, and these guys can just get lazier and weaker, and they're there to be used, but they just keep stealing their work. So it's the right exercise, but your brain is coordinating it wrong. All right, so you have to change it within the movement. The next thing could be, the weakness could be the result of poor stability. So this is very common to beginners. So the reason they're weak is not because their muscles aren't weak, or not necessarily truly weak. It's the way that their brain's coordinating the movements that makes them weaker. So because they're not sure of how to do things, and the brain doesn't understand how to coordinate it, slows everything down. So it can understand and make sense of what's going on. But when that happens, the timing's disrupted. And understand the timing is everything to you. So if you get the timing right, the strength is increased significantly. So another great quote from Gray Cook: are dysfunctions anatomically specific or movement specific? The glute medius may appear to do what it needs to do in a bilateral stance, like example squatting, but as soon as we get into single leg stance or a lunge or split stance, person's movement may deteriorate. Is this problem really the glutes, or is this the problem of the fact they don't move well in that pattern? This would be an example of a lunge and a single leg squat. So is this where, say, if we tested this Dylan here on a isolated glute strength and demonstrates he can do it well, how can he not use that muscle within this? It's not the muscle, it's the fact that he doesn't know how to coordinate it with the right positioning and timing. All right, so that's why you have to look at many things. All joints require stability. So when your body slows movement down, it's to make sense of what's going on, and you activate muscles in a certain way that they're not designed for. And in some cases, you may activate muscles that are not even required to complete the movement because the timing is too slow. For example, lifting things up slowly when you should have lifted up quickly, especially rotational movements, a big one on this. You now start to incorporate muscles that would never have seen that work, and now they will stiffen up and begin to work in a movement that they were never needed for, because you should have moved through it quickly and they wouldn't have seen it. And you can see why when you move too slowly in certain movements, you disrupt the timing, you create imbalance, and you'll always see tightness and weakness as the end result. Alright, so what is really happening with this person is they're not using the right timing and they're making it harder than it needed to be. You cannot train the stabilizers the same. So trying to treat abdominal stabilizers like bicep curls is never a good idea. They don't work like that. They don't have the same role as moving muscles. They're more like a reflex. They don't have the ability to move you. They only have the ability to hold you together. So even rotator cuff things and stuff like that. Those external rotation, they're only one role of the rotator cuff, but the main role is to keep the shoulder in the socket. Alright, so you need to train it pushing and pulling in the right positioning to really effectively train it the way it's designed. So stability and timing. So I believe if you train your core like you would a bicep curl, you make stronger bicep and your stability improves. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that, like we just spoke. And this is a good example where the origin and insertion method of thinking blinds people are making poor choices. These would be two examples of better shoulder stabilizing, where we're really working the rotator cuff. This one's working hip, trunk and shoulder, as is this one. Great examples of stability training with reflex timing. Timing again is everything. Positioning and timing. It's not like one muscle on the job that we're working on. There's multiple muscles, but we will develop strength in serratus anterior, strengthen the core of both of these if they're done well. Weakness could be a protective mechanism. So this is the last thing. So body's very smart, can anticipate the pain before you even move. So it can instantly rearrange and change motor programs and movements to protect itself from further harm. And there's another factor to consider when observing what appears to be a tight muscle or a weak muscle. So did a video recently where I recreated what an example of a client we saw that was doing exactly that, where we saw weakness and tightness from a compensation of trying to protect itself. So when we used some clever coaching to overcome that, we were able to reintegrate the system with a better timing and positioning. So assessment's critical. So you must use a thorough assessment to ensure that you do not miss protective mechanisms at work. And a big example of part of our ACL, this is only the stability checklist. It included mobility and the strength ones, but this would just give us things that we're looking for. You know, some of them are isolated to rule out things, because if there is a weakness in the isolated, there's definitely going to be a weakness in the integrated. But if they pass this, then we rule that out. You know what I mean? So it's really difficult to spot the problem, as you will see many other things happening and compensating. All right. So if you're not assessing, it means you're guessing. The last thing, when the body anticipates the danger of the muscles being able to protect the joint from damage, it creates its own version of stability, and we call this stiffness. So no amount of stretching or mobility work will get rid of stiffness. If anything, it makes it worse. The only way to get rid of it is to learn to create stability within the movement pattern itself. And this is again where we see clever coaching techniques and use of tools to help the person find the positioning better without any stiffness returning or pain, importantly. So again, on the opposite side of that, someone with a lack of mobility who neglects the mobility work or stretching will pay a big price. All right. So this is an example of so using these exercises, creating too much stiffness, and now they're going to lose stabilising as a result. So enough repetition, body becomes great at moving in this manner with stiffness, and it will rearrange all the similar motor programs to use this same method. If you improve your mobility and the person's instantly shows a better strategy for them, begin to see the stiffness is not its most efficient option. So care must be taken how much you apply, because if you do too much too soon, the body just resorts back to what it was doing before, and if there's not enough, then there will necessarily no need to change or integrate the new information into the motor program. So good videos and website articles on this. You can look in the description under the video for the links to those. Find the right balance between too much and not enough. Just right looks like that. So if you're not applying enough, you won't have enough change. Too much looks like that. I know all this sounds very complicated, but it all comes back to how you move. So if you start to train your muscles and body parts individually, you're going to sort of ruin how you time things. All right. So you only have to look at toddlers and babies to see how they move, to see examples of this. So instead of blaming single muscles, try and just improve how you move. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you want more information, go to our website here and check out the description on the video for more stuff. All right. See you on our next video.